Well, with all the rituals and return to the start of the season, all the things we were looking forward to, all the things that mean we are truly back for the start of the season, this is certainly one right here. It's the Panther-Lair Post-Game Show. We are live after Pitt's 61-9 dismantling of Duquesne. A beatdown, a blowout, if ever there was one. There was a brief moment where it didn't feel like it was going to be one, but it turned into one right quick. What was the score? At one point, it was 14-6. After Duquesne scored, they made it 14-6, and it started to get a little bit not apprehensive, not concerned. I think everyone was so confident. Most of us were so confident that Pitt was going to win, but yeah, it was a little bit closer than you thought it should be in the second quarter. But Pitt then ran away with it. Scored. Let's see. After Duquesne made it 14-6, Pitt scored 34 unanswered points. So they more or less made the point there. I think we all expected this to be a win. Most thought it would be a blowout, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. Pitt blew out Duquesne today at Acrisure Stadium, 61-9. That was, I was like, oh, that's probably the first time they scored 60 in a long time. No, they scored 73 against Youngstown State last year. So it's kind of what they do against these FCS teams. I think you could. I mean, there's a lot of different ways we're going to carve this game up here. There's a lot of different ways we're going to look at this game and talk about this game. It sure beats the days of even beating Albany 33-7 or Villanova 28-7 or something like that, or going to overtime against Youngstown State, beating Youngstown State by 8 points in Pat Narduzzi's first year. I mean, all of this, this outcome today is far superior to any of those. And so I'll take the way Pitt has played in these FCS games the past 4 or 5 years more than, remember the Delaware game in 2019, I think it was? That was the week after the UCF game. Kenny Pickett was banged up, so he didn't play. Nick Patty did. They won 17-14. I think most people would agree 61-9 is far better than 17-14. They all go in the win column, or they all go in the record as a win, and but 61-9, 17-14, yeah, I think you definitely prefer that. There's a lot to talk about from this game, though, for sure, even though it's a blowout win over an FCS opponent. I think there's a lot to talk about, certainly on both sides of the ball, all three phases, because special teams was big here. I think Kenny Johnson and Desmond Reed combined for about 360 some all-purpose yards. They both had long returns. Obviously, Desmond Reed had the longest return with an 88-yard punt return touchdown, but Kenny Johnson had a 78-yard kick return. He had a couple of long punt returns, helped set up some touchdowns. Some good work there out of the special teams units. Not good getting a blocked extra point, but you chalk that up to a freshman kicker and first game and operations and all those kinds of things. But certainly the return units, I can't even say seem to be in midseason form, because I can't remember another game where Pitt was so consistently good in the return game as they were today. You could, FCS, FBS, it doesn't matter. Can you remember another game where Pitt was as good in the return game as they were today, with multiple players doing it? Kenny Johnson, Desmond Reed, both shining on the return units today. So we have all three phases to talk about. We are going to get to all of them. We're going to talk about Eli Holstein. We'll talk about Blue Hicks, or as I will henceforth refer to him, Glue Hicks. Nobody likes that one. Everybody's giving me a hard time about it, but that just, you don't realize that just emboldens me to continue saying Glue Hicks all the time. Jim broke the seal on the deuces loose when Deuce Spann had a catch and a nice run after that, but I told him now he can't do it anymore. He's now used his one time for the deuces loose. He can't say it anymore. But Deuce Spann, I think, had 2 catches for 15 yards. He had 14 yards after the catch, so that's interesting. Thought they had a shot to maybe hit him in the back corner on a fade pass, but they didn't have the timing down. Eli Holstein didn't throw that one all that great. Timing much better on Glue Hicks' second touchdown. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Desmond Reed. We'll talk about defense, and obviously both the sides of the line of scrimmage, the offensive line, the defensive line. A little more encouraging on the defensive side than the offensive side, but we'll talk about what that means. Marco Tyner says Quadri Henderson days, thinking about some of the other times when Pitt has been really good in the return game. Yeah, there was probably a Quadri Henderson game where it was the return units were as effective as they were today, but that was 9 years ago. And I think, today was a pretty impressive display from the return units. So excited to see that and what might come out of that. Because, if you, like me, have been predicting a 2,000-yard all-purpose yard season for Desmond Reed, him getting, what did he have today? 150, let me look, 147 yards. Kenny Johnson actually had more. He had 189 yards. He had 47 receiving yards, 78 kickoff yards, 64 punt return yards. Desmond Reed had 66 rushing yards, only 2 receiving yards, and 79 punt return yards because he had the 88-yard return for a touchdown and then lost some yardage after that. But Desmond Reed contributing very little in the receiving game today. I think he had 1 catch for 2 yards, and he was only targeted once. Desmond Reed is going to do much more than that in the receiving game all season long, and I think we can all look forward to that. I imagine he'll have multiple 200-yard all-purpose games, and I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a little closer to 300. I thought he would kind of push for that area, push to be in that range when he had 88 yards on his first touch, but he didn't quite get there. So lots to talk about in this game. Of course, you know the deal with the post-game show. Jump in the chat screen over there. Post your comments, your questions. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can, respond to as many comments as we can. If you want to make sure we answer your question or read your comment, you could be a super chatter. Click that little $sign down there at the bottom. Kick a couple bucks to the podcast. We appreciate that for sure, and we'll definitely read your comment or your question. For the super chatters, we'll try to get through everybody's as much as we can, but super chatters get a little bit of preference as far as that goes. Overall takeaways from this game, 61-9. End result, what you want it to be. In the final score, in Eli Holstein's stat line, Eli Holstein goes 15 of 23 for 215, 4 touchdowns and a pick. He also had 41 rushing yards on 7 attempts, averaging about 6 yards per attempt. That's what you want it to be. You want a game where you win by 52 points. You want your quarterback to throw 4 touchdowns. You want your team to, put up 300 passing yards, 158 rushing yards, not quite what you want. But, I mean, you want to have this kind of production. You want to have your team finish against an FCS opponent only giving up 37 rushing yards, just barely over 200 total yards, less than 4 yards per play allowed. A bunch of sacks, bunch of tackles for loss. Like, you look at it on the whole. You pull back, before you dig into details this and specifics that, you had the game you want to have, right? You had the result and the outcome you want to have. Beyond just what you wanted to win, you got a big blowout win, and you had a lot of production that you would want to finish the game with. But then as you zoom in, you start getting these areas where you get a little concerned. It wasn't the complete dominance start to finish that maybe you would like to see. It wasn't the great, like start to finish excellent top end play from the quarterback that you were hoping to see. It wasn't the excellent start to finish dominance from the offensive line or the defensive line that you were hoping to see. It wasn't the dominance of the running game start to finish that you hope to see. And I feel like, he's just going through all the negative stuff. They just won a game by 52 points. How are you going to be negative? But I'm doing that to get it out of the way because, it's a reality. We all saw that. We all saw that this game was 14-6, 5 minutes into the second half or into the second quarter, excuse me. And so, we all saw that it wasn't exactly what you would want it to be. But eventually, Pitt did dominate this game. Eventually, Pitt did play at a really high level. Eventually, Pitt did ultimately push Duquesne around. They never really got the running game going. I think when you look at the final stat, let me see. Pitt rushed for 158 yards. 53 came on 1 carry by Desmond Reed, right? I think we can probably have a conversation about whether, maybe that's just how this offense is, that they're not going to be great at chipping away, particularly with the run. They're just going to bang their head against the wall until that one run comes. And, Desmond Reed, it might just be 1 yard, 2 yards, 1 yard, -1, 1 yard, 2 yards, 67. Like it just might kind of be like, and then at the end of the day, he's got 140 yards on 18 carries or something like that. And you're like, wow, that's crazy. And like 2 of his carries make up 90 of those yards. Like that might just be what their running game is. And I don't want to draw too many conclusions based on what they did against Duquesne, but that might be how it goes, because I would have liked to have seen Pitt's offensive line control the line of scrimmage better. I like, particularly in the run. I thought they did okay keeping Eli Holstein upright. He took the 1 sack, which came when Kendall Stanley stepped in at right tackle after Ryan Baer left the game. And that's a little concerning. Baer didn't get hurt on a play and leave immediately. He looked like he got a little bit banged up, stayed in the game, and then didn't return for the next possession when Pitt got the ball back. And so Kendall Stanley came in and proceeded to give up a sack on the very first play that he was on the field. That's not a strong endorsement for him, but that was the only one. So they did an okay job protecting Eli Holstein. Maybe Duquesne was just selling out to stop the run, but I didn't think Pitt controlled the line of scrimmage as far as establishing the run the way you would like to see them do, the way you would hope that they would do, particularly against an FCS opponent. But like I say, maybe that's just who they are, that they're just going to chip away, and then hit those big ones downfield, those big runs. Eli Holstein, was not very encouraging in the early going. I think in the first quarter, he was 5 of 8 for 34 yards. He throws the interception early in the second quarter. It's a bad decision, and even he admitted that. Even he acknowledged after the game that throwing that interception was a bad decision. It was, double covered in the end zone, and he had a tight end sitting, right there for a first down, right at the sticks. He just needed to take that first down, and then, as he said, go ahead and score the touchdown later. But he took the shot at the end zone and ended up turning the ball over. And that's a mistake that you can't make. I mean, he can't make that throw. You've got to be smarter, even if you're trying to be more aggressive, even if you're playing against an FCS opponent. You got to be smarter than that. You got to make better decisions. But I did think he got better as the game went on. I thought he got a little bit more comfortable. And I think, some of it might be using tempo a little bit more. Some of it might just be him settling in. He places that second touchdown to Blue Hicks perfectly. He just put it right on the money when he had missed, 1 or 2 similar throws to the corner of the end zone earlier in the game. He put it right on the money. The touchdown to Kenny Johnson was, I think, like, if there's such a thing as a vintage Eli Holstein play, I think that touchdown to Kenny Johnson was where, he didn't really scramble because he didn't really even, he didn't leave the pocket, but he moved around in the pocket trying to buy himself time, ends up stepping up, basically going right toward the line of scrimmage before he fires it to Johnson right at the goal line. Like, to me, that play was what Eli Holstein does at his best. Buy a little time, fire away. And if he's got doing that, it requires a certain chemistry and synergy with your wide receivers. I think he's got that with Kenny Johnson. We'll see how it's developing with the other guys, particularly the new guys like Blue Hicks or Deuce Spann, Raphael Williams being out there. And so that's, that's what you want Eli Holstein to do. That's a vintage Holstein play. It's a great Holstein play. And he nailed it. And so I think he got better as the game went on. Just breaking down by quarters, he was 5 of 8 for 34 yards in the first quarter. In the second and third quarters combined, he went 10 of 15 for 181 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. So 5 of 8 for 34 yards and a touchdown in the first quarter. Not great. You'd like to do a little bit better. He didn't look great, beyond just the numbers. Second and third quarters, I think his play got better, and the stat line speaks for itself. Second and third quarter, 10 of 15, 181, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Like that's good, and I think he did play better. Was it perfect? No. I don't think it's always going to look pretty when Eli Holstein does it, but he got it done. And you can make a case that you could say, well, you're playing against Duquesne, you're playing an FCS game. Should you have to just get it done? You know what I mean? Like, well, it's okay because you took care of business. No, or should you be able to play at a little bit of a higher level, make it look a little bit better because of your opponent, your level of competition? And I get that. Kind of just, it might just be who he is, right? That he's going to find a way to get it done in most cases. You know what I mean? In most games, he's going to find a way to get it done. like he did today against Duquesne. Desmond Reed, I mean, he does what he does, right? 88-yard punt return, 53-yard touchdown run. The one thing that was missing today was the passing. He didn't really catch hardly any passes. He was only targeted once. Maybe that was by design. Maybe they're going to find new ways to get him the ball. They're going to get him the ball, though. I thought Juelz Goff looked good, 7 carries for 31 yards and a touchdown. I think he looks really promising. I think Kenny Johnson looks like he's ready to be the guy. He had 4 catches for 47 yards and a touchdown, but obviously all the big return work as well. Blue Hicks looks like he is delivering on some of that hype that we heard throughout training camp, 4 for 55 and 2 touchdowns. Bryce Yates with the big 60-yard catch as the true freshman there at the end of the game. Raphael Williams had a big 45-yard catch to set up a touchdown. Malachi Thomas with a nice 34-yard catch, runs up the sideline and scores a touchdown. Not a smart decision after the play. I didn't actually see what he did to take the unsportsmanlike conduct, excessive celebration, whatever it was. But Eli Holstein and Pat Narduzzi both made it pretty clear that nobody feels like his actions were acceptable. But I think you saw some of the ability that he's got on that play. And so, and then the offensive line. We'll see what the pressure numbers look like, who gave up the pressures, who allowed guys into the backfield, who blocked well and who didn't, over the next couple of days. But I just would have liked to have seen them push Duquesne back a little bit more than they did and create some more running room for Desmond Reed. Even if Duquesne is selling out to stop the run, which I'm sure they did. It's Mickey Jacobs. He was a GA under Pat Narduzzi. He's running a lot of Narduzzi similar stuff and probably has a similar, stop the run at all costs mentality. But still, even with that, you'd like to think that the ACC team would be able to establish the line of scrimmage against the FCS team. The other side of the ball, I would like to have seen a little bit more production out of the defensive line. I'm just kind of looking through those guys real quick of who, Maverick Grazio had 3 tackles. Zach Crothers had 2. They both had half a tackle for loss. Nate Temple had 2 tackles. Blaine Spires got the start. He had 2 tackles and a tackle for loss and a couple hurries officially. Joey Zielinski had the 1 sack among the defensive ends and the defensive line. Not a lot of production out of the D-line. I thought they got into the backfield a decent amount. I mean, they did a great job against the run. Pitt stopped the run. They shut down the run. And I think they did a great job there. But, getting after the quarterback, not as much as, again, so many of these things are relative to what you think they should be able to do against an FCS team, right? Like, what are you expecting against an FCS team? What level of play do you expect? And I think rightfully so, most of us expected a little bit more, except for the linebackers. The linebackers were really good. The linebackers played at a really high level. Kyle Lewis, sacks on back-to-back plays. He had 3 tackles for loss. Rasheem Biles was flying around. Braylon Lovelace did a good job in the middle. That depth is questionable, although Cam Lindsey, actually, so we're going to, at this point, we'll bring out the shot of the game. Okay. Because I was like, oh, it's gotta be Blue Hicks. You know what I mean? It's gotta be Glue Hicks, right? Because he made an awesome play. But I think there's going to be plenty of time for that. All right. I got to open the beer for my chaser. I don't know how this shot's going to go down. I haven't done a shot of whiskey in a while. It was going to be Blue Hicks for that sick one-handed touchdown. I mean, that was an incredible touchdown catch, like just outstanding. I was like, it's got to be him. But I think there are going to be a lot of opportunities to have a shot of the game for Blue Hicks, and he'll get the honorary shot of the game or the secondary shot of the game here. But Cam Lindsey, on that play when he got his sack, and it almost was a strip sack and, almost turned into a defensive touchdown, almost it would have been Pitt's only takeaway of the game. Cam, like, the quarterback was scrambling. I think it was, the quarterback was scrambling, gets away from this guy, gets away from that guy. He's running around the edge. And, like, I don't even know where Cam Lindsey came from. I don't know where Cam Lindsey came from because he looked like he was shot out of a cannon and hit that quarterback. And I don't know where he came from, but he came flying into the play. And, like, if that's a sign of what Cam Lindsey can do and what he's going to be able to do, like, I still have concerns about the depth of the linebackers, but I know they at least have one really good backup, and that's Cam Lindsey. Now he's playing as a redshirt freshman. There are going to be ups and downs for him for sure, but that was a heck of a play. So let's. Oh man, we haven't opened this thing in a while. I don't know how this shot's going to go, but for Cam Lindsay, we got to do it, right? All right. So the first, Backshore Apparel, shot of the game. And shout out to our friends at Backshore Apparel. They got great gear. You got to go check it out. Beach gear, beach tech is what they call it. They got the hats and the shirts. Perfect stuff to wear if you're going out in the sun, you're going golfing, you're going to the beach. And it's owned by a Pitt fan, right? It's a big-time Pitt fan. Mike, the owner there, he's a huge Pitt fan. He's a Panther-Lair.com subscriber. He's Alliance 412 member. He does it all, and he's got this great business selling sweet stuff. Some of them are even in Pitt colors or Pitt adjacent colors. You can go check it out. BackshoreApparel.com. And they sponsor the Backshore Apparel shot of the game. So the Backshore Apparel shot of the game was Cam Lindsay looking like he was shot out of a cannon to fly in there and get that sack on the quarterback. What could have been a takeaway, but it ultimately ended up being ruled that the quarterback was down. Nevertheless, Cam Lindsay killed it. So Cam Lindsay, the Backshore Apparel shot of the game is for you. Oh, boy. It's been a while. Whew. Drink him if you got him, folks. Oh, my goodness. All right. I got to get back into game shape. First game of the year, you got to shake off the rust. You got to, get back up to speed. You've been spending all your time, not playing against other teams and apparently not doing shots of whiskey. And so you gotta get up to game shape. And that's what I'll say about Eli Holstein. All right. Like Eli Holstein, he said it. He even acknowledged it after the game. He said, maybe there was a little bit of rust. I mean, the reality is he hasn't played in a game since the first two drives against Louisville in the regular season, the penultimate game of the regular season. He hasn't played a full game since the SMU game. It's been a long time. And he's been hurt and he's been banged up. He was still nursing that injury coming into the offseason, going into spring camp. I think it slowed him down in spring camp. And I think that in turn slowed him down a little bit in training camp. And the result is that there was some rust, and I think you saw it in the start of the game. I mean, like, we saw plenty of slow starts last year for Eli Holstein where he wasn't so hot right off the bat. And then he ended up, playing better as the game went on. And I think we saw that again today. And I think we could chalk some of that up to rust. Like, I'm willing to accept that for now. I think with so many of these things, we can look at it and we say, okay, well, here's the rationalization. Here's one possible explanation that maybe makes you a little bit less concerned about it. And we can accept those until we're proven wrong, proven otherwise. So in the case of Eli Holstein, like, I'm willing to accept that there's some rust. I'm willing to accept that it's been a long time since he played in a game and he's been through a lot since then and, injury and rehabbing injury and all of that. I'm willing to accept that. I'm willing to accept that he got more comfortable as the game went on today, played at a higher level as a result, and should be better, prepared and ready to go when they play Central Michigan next Saturday. I'm willing to accept all of that. But the reality is, if he comes out next Saturday and he struggles to start the game like he struggled today, I don't think it's going to cost Pitt the game against Central Michigan, but it's going to start raising some real questions because you can't go to Morgantown and do that. As we're seeing, today, you can't go to Tallahassee and do that after Alabama after Florida State knocked off number 8 Alabama 31-17. We kept sort of dismissing that Florida State game. Who knows what they're going to be? Well, they just beat Alabama, top 10 team, by 2 touchdowns. So that might not be your grandfather's Alabama, but it's not your older cousin's Florida State either. So that might be a bit of a tough one. But you can't make those mistakes. You can't you can't play like Eli Holstein did in some of these games against ACC opponents because you're going to dig yourself a hole. And it's going to be a lot tougher to crawl out of it. You're not going to be able to get 61 points. You're not going to score 8 touchdowns against Louisville. You're not going to score 8 touchdowns against Notre Dame or Miami. You're going to have to play better consistently throughout the whole game. And I think Eli Holstein knows that. And I think he'd probably be the first to admit it. But he certainly didn't do that today. I think if there's one biggest thing that we're looking for out of next week's game, out of the Central Michigan game, it's that Eli Holstein plays better pretty much throughout the whole game. You know what I mean? He's far more consistent, far more effective start to finish. That might be the number one most important thing looking for in next Saturday's game. All right. Well, there's a lot of topics to discuss. Let's get into some of the comments and questions here. Mike S. said, Chris, did anyone on the depth chart end up not dressing today? As I look through the depth chart, to answer your question, I want to say the only guy on the depth chart who did not dress, like was not in uniform today, and I'm looking through it, at least offense and defense. I mean, I assume all the specialists dressed. The one guy would be Jaden Moore, the defensive end. He was listed as an or starter with Blaine Spires at defensive end on the first official depth chart. He was not in uniform. He was not on the sideline. And guys who are not on the sideline are usually not on the sideline. They're usually up in the, they say up in the press box. They're not in the press box. They're not sitting there with us. They're in like the coach's box or something like that. And they're up there because they're hurt and there's a risk. Like that if they're on the sideline, they could potentially get more hurt. They might not have the mobility to get out of the way if the play comes, out of bounds or something. And so that's a pretty big one to be concerned about, because I think the expectations for Jaden Moore were really, really high this season. And his absence today does not bode well for his future availability, at least in the short term, immediate future availability. Like, I would say the fact that he did not dress today and was not on the sideline today probably rules him out for Central Michigan. And I'm going to say I'm going to guess it's a long shot for West Virginia, but we'll see. We'll talk more about that on the message boards, but I think he's the only guy on the two deep who did not dress today. Everybody else dressed, and I think everybody else played. I don't know if Torian Chester got on the field, but I think the other 10 offensive linemen on the depth chart played. Jakirian Turner, I don't think he got in the game, but every other running back did. Oh, Mason Heinschel also. I keep finding guys who didn't play. Heinschel, Turner, Chester, and Moore are probably the only guys on the depth chart who did not see the field. Like, all the linebackers got out there. Nick Lappy played middle linebacker and money linebacker. All the safeties played. All the corners were on the field. Interesting to see Sean Lee as seemingly the fourth corner. Shadarian Harrison, obviously, I think I'm going to be curious to see the snap counts, because he was in almost, I would bet he was pretty much even with the two starters, Rashad Battle and Tamon Lynham. But the fourth guy in was Sean Lee. It wasn't Rashawn Murray. Rashawn Murray came in after Sean Lee. So true freshman getting some play. He was one of the true freshmen we talked about as being, maybe being the most likely to not redshirt. It certainly looked like it today. But everybody else on the depth chart pretty much got in, and I think Moore was the only guy who did not dress. Super chats here. Royce Beacom, you're a super chatter, but I got to find your question. I don't know what you asked. RJC Man 38 is a super chatter, says need to see better play calling, or it's going to be a long season. Play calling is probably the one thing I have nothing to say about one way or the other in this game, because we know that they hold things back. We know they hold things back in the FCS game when it's the first game of the season. When it was Youngstown State last year, in the fourth game of the season, you already had 3 games of tape out there. You open up the playbook a little bit more. I think they held things back. I don't think they had the full playbook available. I'll be curious how much of it they actually use against Central Michigan next week, if they're trying to preserve some things for, the West Virginia game and beyond. The reality is, like, they're going to throw more than one pass to Desmond Reed. Right. I think we know that. And so whatever their package is for getting the ball to Reed in the passing game, like, that has yet to be revealed to us. I don't think we've yet seen that. I don't think we saw it today, because if we did, I think we would have seen him end up with more than 147 all-purpose yards, because he probably would have had 40 or 50 receiving yards. So I'm not as concerned about play calling right now. That's a conversation we'll have after West Virginia. We'll have it after Louisville. We'll have it after Central Michigan if things get dicey next week. Which they shouldn't. But West Virginia, Louisville. You get into the ACC, then we'll talk more about play calling. Today it was just, I think it was. I think they probably had a limited playbook. I think they held some things back, and so I'm not going to get on them too much about the play calling. Let's see if we can find Royce Beacom's a super chatter, but you got to put your comment in the super chat. So let me see if I can find. Oh, Royce Beacom says how many sacks versus an FCS team. So Pitt had 4 sacks. They allowed 1. That's not bad. Yeah, I think that's fine. You would like to have seen them get 5 or 6 or 7 sacks on defense, but they got 4. Kyle Lewis got a 2 on back-to-back plays. Like some of these guys that you're expecting to have a big role this year, like some of the most important players on the team, Desmond Reed, Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, I thought they more or less lived up to it. Kenny Johnson, I would say, more or less lived up to it. I think they, I think, Kyle Lewis had 6 tackles. Half of them were behind the line of scrimmage. 2 of them were sacks, on back-to-back plays. Like, Kyle Lewis is up to the task. I think Rasheem Biles looked like he played really well. Desmond Reed obviously made plays. So I think most of these guys that you wanted to see, guys who, guys that you're counting on to play big roles this year, I think they did a good job. Let's scroll through here. Voodoo IPA says today's tailgate had 1 8% beer and 5 that were 10% and above. Good God, man. I don't think I could have made it through the game. Maybe it was just a lightweight, but you had 5 10% beers and 1 8% beer before the game started. I wouldn't have been able to hang. Benjamin Glazer says 2 things. 1, the wide receiver group was the stars of the day. And 2, that FSU game takes on an all-new shine after the Bama game. Stars of the day. Yeah, I mean, I put Blue Hicks pretty high on that list. Malachi Thomas made a great play. Kenny Johnson had a great game. I put those guys pretty, Raphael Williams had the big 45-yard catch. Bryce Yates had a 60-yard catch. I think Pitt had 13 big plays. If you count big plays as like runs of 10 yards or more and passes of 15 yards or more, I think Pitt had 13 of them total. I think 5 runs and 8 passes. And they all came on touchdown drives, which, I mean, you would say is probably should be the case, but they managed to get some pretty big plays. The Bryce Yates 60-yard pass from Cole Gonzalez against Duquesne's backups and all. I mean, we'll see, but I think we all know that a freshman receiver is going to have to play at least one, and they had all 3 of them out there. So they all took 1 game off the 4 they get to play during the regular season and still redshirt. So we'll see who kind of shakes out there. I kind of thought Tony Kinsler was the top guy, but Bryce Yates played before him. So we'll see who emerges going forward. Like the rotation, wide receiver, you obviously had Kenny Johnson, Raphael Williams, and Blue Hicks starting. Then you brought in Deuce Spann, Zion Fowler-El, and is there one other guy? Is there one other receiver who's kind of in that mix? I guess Yates was the next guy. Bryce Yates. Sincerely, I don't think he played on offense. If he did, he didn't get targeted. I don't remember seeing him out there. Although I think he was listed in the participation chart, so maybe he did play a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that was basically your rotation, right? Johnson, Williams, and Hicks as your top 3. Spann, Zion Fowler-El, and Bryce Yates as your next 3, and then they kind of brought in the other freshmen, Tony Kinsler and Cam Sapp, after that to sort of fill in. And I think that's largely what we expected. As far as the Florida State game, yeah, that's interesting. I didn't get a chance to really watch it. I mean, obviously, Florida State was able to run the ball. They had 230 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. Tommy Castellanos, 9 of 14 for 152. He didn't really do much passing-wise, but he did run for 78 yards and a touchdown. That can be effective, but it also can put your quarterback at risk. So we'll see if he makes it or how long he makes it. Another Wombat says the first bit of that game was rough to watch. Eli makes some crazy decisions sometimes and has some questionable mechanics. I think, and I don't know, I could be completely wrong about this. Eli Holstein could confirm or deny. I thought at the beginning of the game, it like on a number of his passes, it was like it was one or the other, one extreme or the other, where either he was a little too hesitant, was holding onto the ball and waiting too long to make the throws, or he was so locked on to his first read that he knew where he was throwing the ball before it was even snapped. And so there was one play down in the end zone. I forget who he threw it to, but he had Raphael Williams like wide open, but he was just locked into whoever it was, Kenny Johnson or Blue Hicks or somebody like that, and just fired to him, and it got broken up because the guy was covered. And sometimes that's going to be the case. Sometimes you're going to have it pretty locked into your mind before you snap the ball of where you're going with it. You need to be able to react, though. You need to be able to read. You need to be able to react. And again, maybe that some of that is chalked up to rust. Maybe he was a little bit rusty, and going with those quick, one read passes might have been a good way to loosen it up. But it didn't quite work out early in the game. But like I say, I thought he got better as the game went on. Josh Newark says, I thought Kyle Lewis was unreal. A little worried we didn't get a push from the O-line, though. Yeah, that's a concern. I think you would have liked to seen the offensive line dominate the line of scrimmage a little bit better. And Kyle Lewis, yeah, he's a stud. He looks like he's going to live up to the All-American season he had last year, and maybe even better. Mark Shilaju says the pros, the overall defensive performance, and Eli Holstein settled down during the game. The cons were giving up big plays and the O-line running game. I'm with you on the O-line running game. Bit of a concern there. Big plays that they gave up. They had the big 59-yard pass. Had maybe one other big pass, but they largely limited it. I would guess that they gave up fewer than 5, what Pat Narduzzi would term explosives. It might have been fewer than 4. I'm sure he'll tell us on Monday and talk about how it's where they want to be in terms of explosives and how many they give up. But again, some of those things like the big pass to Isabella, the 59-yard pass, Javon McIntyre ends up trailing him there. I'm sure there was something else that was supposed to happen. Like the safeties they often look like they're the ones who screwed up. And then you talk to the coaches and it turns out, well, somebody else screwed up and the safety was just trying to cover for it. I think there was a play in the Sun Bowl a couple of years ago, 2022, where it looked like Eric Hallett had screwed up, but it really wasn't him. It was like somebody else. So, I don't know who made that mistake. It could be a miscommunication, which again, you sort of expect in the first game of the season, right? David Allen says Florida State game is looking a heck of a lot tougher than we thought. Yeah. If Florida State's going to play like this all year, they're going to be really tough. Voodoo IPA says, I wanted Eli Holstein out of the game earlier. No reason to be in that long. Eli and Desmond Reed, right? Reed had that long 53-yard touchdown run. And I thought, well, that's it. Second play of the third quarter, second play of the second half, 53-yard run. No need for him to be playing anymore, but there he was, still out there. And Holstein got 1, 2. I mean, Holstein played all the way through the end of the third quarter, and then they brought in Cole Gonzalez after that. So I probably would have pulled those guys earlier too. But at the same time, if we're talking about rust with Eli Holstein, if we're talking about him not really, needing to get his groove back and get comfortable on the field again, well, you got to be on the field to do that. And maybe you don't gain as much. Like you do take a risk. You take a risk that he could get hit, he could get hurt. But also, there is some benefit, even if it's playing against Duquesne and an FCS team. There is some benefit to being on the field and playing. There's a benefit to taking live snaps against a live defense that's trying to hit you, whereas your defense in scrimmages in practice wasn't allowed to hit you. And so there is something to be said for that. There's a benefit to that. And, you got to balance it. You got to decide when it's the right time to take him out, versus getting more quality work for him. And I probably would have gone a little bit sooner. I definitely would have gone sooner with Desmond Reed. Probably would have gone a little bit sooner with Eli Holstein, but, it all worked out, right? Voodoo IPA also says, congratulations to Uncle Pitt on being the tailgate of the game. Did the Hailgate end up being the tailgate of the game? I saw the picture, but I couldn't really tell what I couldn't tell what the what tailgate it was. I didn't know if I recognized anyone there. Adam Vinchik says Joey Zielinski looks good. Yeah, he was quick. He was faster than I expected him to be. Those defensive ends overall, I thought Spires did okay. Zielinski seemed to get some pressure. Jimmy Scott kind of was looking for him to do a little bit more than he did. Who else played in that group? Zach Crothers was out there. Maverick Grazio played. They used a bunch of defensive ends. Obviously, they didn't have Jaden Moore, so that's going to cut down on what they have and what they're able to do in terms of the rotations. Nate Temple got some snaps out there. Didn't really seem to make much of an impact, and that was pretty late in the game, so that might be what his role looks like this season. But, yeah, I came out of this game more encouraged about Joey Zielinski, for sure, than I was. I didn't know what to expect from him going in. But he looked fast, quick off the ball, and that was good. Cohan says first half was messy for Eli, then he settled down in the second half. Would like some push from the offensive line. Yep, I'm right there with you. I think he needs to get better, and the offensive line needs to get better for sure. Another Wombat says, the problem is, which Eli do you get from drive to drive? He's extremely talented, just error prone. Pitt isn't good enough for him to be a light switch like that. It's something he's always done. So it is something he's always done. I agree about that. But I also think, we're not talking about you brought in Fernando Mendoza, right? Well, this is how he's always played. You brought in Carson Beck. Well, this is how he's always played. You're talking about a guy who was playing for the first time last year. And I'm not excusing it, and maybe it is who he will always be. Maybe he'll always be sort of up and down like this, and he'll be inconsistent, and he will be error prone like that. And I think we've talked a good amount over the last 2 months, and maybe throughout the whole offseason, about Eli Holstein and his inconsistency and kind of how that comes through, and how you take the good with the bad. And he makes a lot of big plays, but he also makes some head scratching decisions. I think you can grow out of the head scratching decisions. I think you can get more experience and get better at it. And I think he did today, start to finish of the game, but it's, I think there can be growth and maturation as a quarterback over the course of his career. That not just, within a game, but from last year to this year. And today was his first time playing. Next week, he's got to be a lot better. I think our post-game show next week is going to be really interesting when we talk about how Eli Holstein plays and what he looks like, and if he's better overall and more consistently in that game than he was today. RJC Man 38 says he looks flat-footed and indecisive. Not good enough if Pitt wants to be a playoff team. I don't know about flat-footed. I mean, he moved around a lot. He had some great scrambles, and that's a big part of his game as well. And, indecisive at times, he looked, he looked like a guy who hadn't played in a while. He looked like a guy who hadn't been out seeing live fire for a while, which is the case. Let's see. Another Wombat follows up and says, we did win by 1 billion points, though, and Ribfest was awesome. I walked through Ribfest. I didn't get anything at Ribfest. It was really busy when I left the game. It always smells amazing. And there was a Sheetz stand. You guys see this? The Sheetz Ribfest stand? Does Sheetz sell ribs? I don't even know what they were selling at that stand. I didn't go to any of them. I had to get home and get ready to do this live show. But I thought that was weird. But all the ribs, the ribs looked awesome. Divs says the win floor is 15 at this point. Yep. Hey, 15-0 is still in reach until you lose that first game, Zach Marshall says, how much of some of the early game issues with the line and Eli in the run game can be attributed to Pitt running a vanilla offense today, or is something more worrisome? Well, I don't think the offensive line got much better with the run game as the game went on until Duquesne put in their backups, and then Pitt had their backups in, and it was just kind of trying to run out the clock. I don't think the first team offensive line ever really did a great job establishing the run. Overall, the quote unquote vanilla offense, the limited offense, the smaller playbook and everything like that, that's going to have an effect. It's going to be a factor. But I think some of Eli Holstein's issues today, particularly early on, weren't necessarily related to that. I think they were related to rust. And that's going to be my story that I stick to until we get to next week and we see how he looks. You can't be rusty 2 games in a row. The rust should be off now. And I think the rust got off either maybe the Kenny Johnson touchdown, I would say. Did the Kenny Johnson touchdown come before the second Blue Hicks touchdown? I think it did. It did. The Kenny Johnson touchdown, to me, is when the rust shook off. I might have to write that in an article. The rust came off on that one. He was really good from then on, and really kind of leading up to that. He had a good drive that culminated in that Kenny Johnson touchdown, and then he was good after that. So, he shook some of the rust off, but then it needs to stay off. You can't have rust again next Saturday. Like, you got to be sharp right out of the gate when you play Central Michigan next week. Kenny Gizmo says Pitt went out and did what they had to do today. I like the fact that the backups got to play Cade Bell's offense as well. Yeah, they got a lot of guys on the field. I was just looking at the true freshmen who played, the transfers who played. I think I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 true freshmen played. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 transfers got on the field and played a decent amount. A couple players made their first career starts in Cruz Brookins and Blue Hicks. So, a lot of guys got some action. A lot of guys got on the field. We got to see some of these guys. And I think that's only a positive. You know what I mean? If you can get guys playing time, particularly young, early in their careers, it's only a positive because that's just going to make them that much more prepared for the next time they go out there. Like Cam Lindsey got a little bit of playing time last year, but the playing time he got today will make him better prepared for when he has to go out next week and play against Central Michigan or West Virginia the week after that, or Louisville 2 weeks later. It's all, every rep is valuable. Every rep is good and helpful. A couple of people are saying that Malachi Thomas threw the ball in the air. Mike S says that. That was what his penalty was. Like I said, I didn't see it. I saw the touchdown and then started writing something down, and then I saw that the flags were out. And so, yeah, that was a bad mistake. Youthful exuberance, but bad mistake. Voodoo IPA says he makes better ribs at home in his smoker. I mean, probably, but the ribs there also smelled really good. David Allen says, agree with your concerns about the O-line and the D-line not pushing Duquesne around. Yeah, and here's the thing, too. We talk about vanilla offense, limited playbook, and everything like that. That shouldn't affect what the offensive line is going to be able to do. You shouldn't need scheme to block well. That should be talent. That should be strength. That should be technique. That should be all those things. Scheme or no scheme, you should be able to block. Now, Duquesne's selling out to stop the run, and maybe that was the case. What's going to stop anybody else from selling out to stop the run? I guess you got to make plays in the passing game, but you got to be able to block better. Cohan wants to know what beer. It's Redbridge. It's gluten-free beer, and I don't think they're ceasing making it. It's an AB beer, AB InBev. It's Anheuser-Busch's gluten-free. It's good. It's like a cheap yellow beer, and there aren't many gluten-free cheap yellow beers like this, so I appreciate it. John Jingleheimer Schmidt is worried about my drinking. I mean, we just started, buddy. It's a long season. RJ Seaman says the Duquesne offensive line was all seniors, played a lot of games together, and Pitt had a very generic playbook too. Yeah, I think they did a pretty decent job, getting pressure. I don't think the Duquesne quarterback was very comfortable. They obviously stopped the run and did a good job there. I want to bring up the Duquesne rushing stats because, the quarterback, Duquesne's quarterback was 4 rushing attempts for minus 26 yards. Well, those were all the, all the sacks. They had one team rush for minus 4 yards. I forget what that was. Maybe when they took the knee or something like that. But you take those out, that's 30 and 5, it's 26. So they gained 67 yards in the run. On 26 rushing attempts. So it's still less than 3 yards per carry. None of their backs really ended up with pretty good numbers. Sean Solomon, a local kid, ended up with 2 carries for minus 3 yards. Butts had 10 for 38. Davis 5 for 17. Oh, the other one was the quarterback, that Kushner guy, had 3 for 10. But they shut down the run. They shut down the run and did a good job pressuring the quarterback. They got 4 sacks. I think they did well against an offensive line, like you said, it has a lot of experience. They played together. and they're a pretty good FCS offensive line, and Pitt was able to do well against them. It's never good enough, but do well. Let's see. Josh Newark says, how good was Cruz Brookins? I mean, looked pretty darn good to me. I think he played well. I think he was flying around out there. He was second on the team in tackles. He had 5 tackles. He had a pass breakup. 3 of his 5 tackles were solo tackles. I think Cruz Brookins is going to be just fine. I thought it was interesting that they didn't really rotate the safeties, like at all. It was Cruz Brookins and Javon McIntyre pretty much the whole game. The only until they started bringing in Josh Garrier and emptying the bench a little bit. The only thing that really changed up is when they went into that Delta defensive sub package, where they'll bring in a third safety and bring a safety up closer to the line of scrimmage, almost playing like a linebacker. They brought in Kavir Baines-Marquez, but he played as like a deep safety. He basically replaced Javon McIntyre, and McIntyre came up and played, they call it the star in the Delta defense, that sub package. So that was interesting to see. Typically, whoever comes in plays that role, but in this case, they like Baines-Marquez playing in the back, and Javon McIntyre playing up close. Roman says the linebackers and DBs were very good today. O-line and D-line left plenty to be desired. Hopefully they take a step forward next week. Yeah, I think we'll all be watching for that for sure. I want to see, Roman also asked any word on the injury severity to Hicks and Bear. I remember when Blue Hicks limped off. I'm trying to find it. I remember that happening. I'm trying to find it and see if he played more after that. Oh, he limped off. Oh, it was the first play of the second half, actually. And so I'm looking through my notes. I don't think he played again after that, but they also were kind of emptying the bench anyway. Like, he got hurt on the first play of the second half. Desmond Reed went for 53 yards on the next snap. He didn't play on the next drive. They Duquesne, Raphael Williams, and Kenny Johnson. And then by the third drive of the second half, it was Duquesne, Zion Fowler, and Bryce Yates. So, I mean, they'd pretty much gone to the reserves at that point. That's something to keep an eye on. It didn't seem too bad for Blue Hicks, but need to keep an eye on that. Yeah, RJ Seaman said it looked like a cramp. It might have been. Although it was not hot today. That was one of the coolest opening days that we can remember. I went back to like 2017. I think the temperature at kickoff was like 66 degrees that year. I think today they announced that it's 64, I want to say. Let me see. In the game book, they have this information, valuable information. 65. They announced it at 65. So it was cool. Nobody should have been cramped for that, but either way. Roman also said Duquesne moved well, but his hands could use some work. Ditto for Malachi Thomas. Yeah, I kind of agree. Like, those guys both. But you know what? It wasn't just those two. There were drops all over the place. A bunch of passes by guys who were maybe playing for the first time or playing here for the first time who didn't. They drop passes. You need to be more consistent than that. Passes that hit them on the hands. Copper Penny wants to know, where'd you score the Red Bridge? I forget where I got this, and I don't want to tell you because I want to still be able to get more myself. So I think they are done selling it. You can still find some lingering around. Check the distributor on 88. Let's see. JAMST 174 says the offense needed the work, a bit risky, but I can see why. Yeah, I think they probably didn't have their full playbook, but they gave Eli Holstein a lot of opportunities to get comfortable with Kenny Johnson, get comfortable with Blue Hicks, get comfortable with Raphael Williams, get comfortable with the tight ends. The one thing we really didn't see out of the offense was the throws to the running backs. And I think that'll come. I think that'll show up probably a little bit more next week, and then definitely against West Virginia. It'll be, they might run a wheel route to Desmond Reed on the first play at West Virginia just because they'll be so bottled up with it. They're just waiting to unleash this weapon they have. TVAX1 says, what little we saw of Cole Gonzalez makes me believe that when Eli Holstein goes down, yes, when, I think we're in better hands at that point anyway. I don't know if he's better, but he's interesting. It's very, very interesting. Definitely has a pretty live arm. Looks pretty comfortable in the offense, and I think is a good backup. Look, I think from the start, like ever since this quarterback room came together with Eli Holstein, Cole Gonzalez, and Mason Heinschel, like I think we've said, like you've got this really kind of ideal scenario where you've got the returning starter, you've got his backup who has a ton of experience in the offense, and you have this like young, promising freshman that everybody's excited about. And so, I think you saw 2 out of those 3 parts today, right? You didn't see Heinschel, which unfortunately leads me to believe he's probably not going to play at all this season because this was the game to do it. But you did see Cole Gonzalez, and he looks comfortable. I don't know if he'll be better than Eli Holstein. Maybe he will, maybe he won't. I don't know. But I would still put my money on Holstein being the guy. But Gonzalez looked more than adequate, I would say. The Mosta says, what was the announced attendance? 53,000 was the announced attendance. 53,006. So if you were one of those 6, shout out to you folks. You guys put them over the top on 53. I don't know if there were 53,000 people there, but it was a good crowd. The students showed up. The students showed up in a big way. They always do, though. Students are reliable. Let's see. RJ Seaman says Eli had a teardrop throw and catch to the corner of the end zone that should make top plays of the day. Yeah, I don't know how Blue Hicks' touchdown catch does not end up as a Sports Center top 10. I mean, like, it was a beautiful throw. And Blue Hicks reaches out with his left hand. I was hoping he would come in and talk to us after the game because I wanted to ask him if he's left-handed or right-handed because he made the catch with his left hand. And, like, if you're right-handed and you can make that catch with your left hand, that's pretty good. Even if you're left-handed and you make that catch with your left hand, that's pretty good. That was a sick catch. I got to think that shows up on the Sports Center top 10. I assume they still do that. Cohan says, I oddly feel a little more comfortable with Gonzalez if Eli would happen to go down for anything. He has a little zip on the ball, knows where to go in the offense. Pickup will pay off in the long run, more comfortable than Nate Yarnell going in. I mean, yeah, I think so. And I mean, like, this is, like we saw what Nate Yarnell did. And so I think our opinions of Nate Yarnell reflect that, right? But Cole Gonzalez, like I say, he looked more than adequate running the offense. And I think that's, he looked like a great backup. He looked like the guy you want to bring in if you need to change quarterbacks. Like, he looked like the guy who, if your starter has to come out or he gets hurt or whatever it is, you've got a guy who can move the offense down the field. I like to see how he runs and how he moves around, but he can move the offense down the field. Roy speaking, did I miss the injury to Braylon Lovelace? Please reiterate if I did. He got hurt, but he came back in. He missed a few plays. I don't know what happened to him, but he came back in, so it seemed like he's fine. Let's see. Yeah, RJC Man points out the field goal kicker, Trey Bukowski, did a great job despite the missed extra point. Yeah, I think he kicked that extra point a little bit low. That's why he got blocked, but he ended up making 2 kicks. They were both relatively short, but it's better to make them than to miss them, right? Both 27-yard kicks in the fourth quarter. Great experience for him. Great for him to go out and get a couple shots there and see what it's like. It's only 27-yard kicks, but hey, better to make them than to miss, right? It's better. It's better. We definitely feel better about it than if he had missed those 27-yard field goals. So Trey Bukowski, good day. He made 8 of 9. No, not 9. How many? 7 of 8 extra points and 2 of 2 field goals. So good for him. All right, last one here. Josh Newark wants to know, anyone know what that Duquesne neon mascot was? Where was the top hat Duke? I have no idea. I don't know why they made the Duquesne mascot a lion or a tiger or whatever he was. I'm not sure. But in the mascot race, Rock won it all. So shout out to Rock for taking it home. All right. Pitt wins 61-9. They opened the season 1-0. You can't get to 15-0 if you don't go 1-0, right? So they beat Duquesne. The Pittsburgh Day crosstown rivalry, if you want to call it that, whatever they were making it out to be. It was a good day on the north side. Pitt wins, plenty of things to work on, and they'll get an opportunity to show how much progress they've made. They take on Central Michigan next Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in today. Make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. These are always fun to do, and I think it'll just get more fun as the season goes on. So, like I say, like and subscribe, and don't forget we'll be back with the Morning Pit on Monday to get your week started. Have a great weekend, everybody. Check out Panther-Lair.com for lots of coverage throughout the weekend, and we will catch up with you on Monday morning for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.